Hello everyone. Let me know if you can hear me fine. I'm glad to have you here. Type in the comments. Type in the comments where you're watching from. I'd be glad to know. I'm glad to have you here. You can see Varied Musa. Thank you so much for joining in. Oh, that's good to have you here. Calling from Germany. That's really good. Yes, thank you for joining in. So today we have something interesting to look at, and that is a conceptual model, which is done in archicad. And I want us to start from scratch. So those who are joining us, let's get started. Okay, Robert Ruger has been waiting. Thank you so much for being here. So we want to do something simple today, and I hope we shall have fun with it. So let's create a free a framework that we are going to start with, and that is by dictating how big this thing is going to be. And I think the most important thing now is for us to first get that image, yeah, the reference image. Let's get it somewhere here, and such that we can always, switch back and forth through this image. Now, this image is not my original piece of work. I got it from Instagram by an artist or an architect, I guess, called Kim. So you can always check him out, yeah. And I think it's an interesting one. So how can we achieve such a thing in archicad? So let's get started, okay? Watching from Kenya. Okay, thank you so much for joining in. My neighbor also, hey, watching from Iraq, but in Kenya. That's interesting. All right, so let's get started. First things first, we need to identify how big this building is going to be. So let's use a polyline. I'm going to pick up a polyline and then make it red such that you guys can be able to see it. And then I'm going to use a simple method of construction, which is rectangular here. And let's make a reference. The reference is going to be, you can type in the comments what you think, how big you think that concept is supposed to be. For my case, I'm going to try and predict the interior, the courtyard, because if you looked at the reference, we have something like a courtyard. So I imagine the courtyard could be perhaps 15 meters by, I'm going to make it like, I don't know, 30 meters. What do you think when you look at this courtyard in the reference? Is it about, I'm thinking here 30 and then here by 15, yeah? So that's what I will take for now. So this is the courtyard, and then I want to make a building around it. So I'll make a copy of this, Ctrl-Shift-D. And once I make a copy of this, I'm going to offset it by the width of the building. So how wide is this building? Perhaps it could be minimum of 6 meters if you had, if you were thinking a usable space, but of course we also have circulation, which may bring it up to 8, or sometimes you can make it even a little bit more wide, maybe 12 meters instead, yeah? So you could have something like that, or I think it should be a little smaller, something like, I don't know, let's just reduce some meters here, because at this point it's just conceptual, and what's important is to get just the proportions right. When the concept has been accepted, then you can go ahead and refine it. So that's the building that we are going to work with. And of course, I also want to think about the form which is going to be around this thing, yeah? So how is the form that is going to be around here? So let's say the height of this building. So let's use this other method of construction, and think about now the height. Yeah, if we look at this reference, we have this height here. Perhaps maybe we can use it 4 meters, I think, for that, and then this will be a little taller, maybe 5 or even more. So let's use 4 meters for this thing. So let's say 4 meters. Thank you, Abdul Hamid, for joining us from Adi University in Tanzania. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so this is 4 meters. Okay, let me make it like so. All right, that's very, very thin. So I'm beginning to think that it's a little smaller. The building is a little smaller than what we made it. So we might want to use this section in order to, you know, to scale this down. So let's scale this down by almost 10 meters, I think, yeah? Because looking at this, yes, something like that. So let's scale this down. So that means we will have to scale everything here down by meters, because getting this first step right is more important. Yeah. So we will scale this thing down such that we are able to get it correct. Of course, we will have to reduce the width as well. But then also we need to think about the width. So you can create the lower ground, which is going to be about 5 meters from here. Yeah, so we will make this 5 meters. Yeah, and let's do this. Let's have a spline to conceptualize what this is going to be, like maybe something like that. But of course, the spline is the worst you can use for this kind of thing, because it's a geometry. It's geometrical. We might need to use lines, and then we call it filleting. Yes, we fillet them. So what's the best thing we can do is to pick up a line, and then let's make it start from somewhere like here. Yeah. Or use the reference lines. If you have never used these guidelines, by the way, they are really important, because now I needed a point here, and then I think something like that, then it goes all the way to somewhere in the middle. So I can pick another guideline, put it here, and then I have something like, you know, so, and I need another guideline, I think, or we shall mirror this. Yeah, so we can mirror this by using this one here. Yeah, so we have something like that. Watching from South Africa, Kwena Kola, thank you so much for joining in. I'm excited to have you here. So now we are building the conceptual framework using just lines to know what we are going to work on in a minute. Thank you for joining in. So here, now we have this, and when you click on this point, now we cannot get the option to chamfer, to fillet. So we might want to enable here suspend grouping. So make sure that you enable suspend grouping such that you can be able to fillet that. So you can say here, let's put in a fillet radius of, like, you know, 2 meters is way too small. Yeah, thank you for joining us from Hungary. Yes, Marvin, we are glad to have you here, and Alex as well from Switzerland. Good, thank you so much for joining us. Now we need to have a fillet here, a radius of, like, let's use 5 meters, I guess. Yeah, yes, and we are here now, and then let's make this also filleted or chamfer or filleted. Yes, so this is the option that you're looking for in the pet palette. Some people don't know how the pet palette works, so they get a little confused. So whenever you click a node, yes, and then this thing pops up, this thing here, this is the pet palette, and it can be moved to anywhere. So from it, you choose this second option, which has fillet stroke chamfer. All right, thank you so much. Watching from Turkey, Karim, thank you for joining us. Edwin from Kenya, thanks for joining us. And then we have someone, Farhat from Turkey, and also Radar. I don't know if I got that right, from Serbia. Thank you so much for joining us. And today we're doing something interesting. And let me know if you are following on how to fillet here, such that we can have something reasonable. Let's say 5 meters. We say okay. Yes, it's as easy as that. And don't forget to also, you know, refer to the reference such that you're not far off from what you're trying to achieve. Yeah, so this is what we are looking at to make certain decisions. Perhaps this radius is more than 5 meters, but of course, you know, always you can come back and change in case you do not like what's happening. So with these selected as well, these lines selected, we can also chamfer here at the top. So let's make this a radius of like 3 meters. Yeah, so I already see what this is talking about. So we expect to have a building like that, and also this kind of thing going on. So we have decided to have this as 4 meters high, and to have this from the ground as 5 meters high. Yeah, that's the, you know, story height. Yes, so now we are going to go ahead and make those as story settings. Someone was asking me in the comments about what's the relevance of story settings. Well, here is where they are relevant. If we look at this reference, I feel that, you know, we need to make this a little higher from the ground here. If you see where my cursor is, up to where this building, which is cantilevering, is starting from, we need to make it a little higher than just the 3 meters. Or so I can, you know, do that by going to story settings. So that's the use of story settings. So if you go to a story like the ground floor, you can right click and click on story settings, and now you have some options to work with here. So you can make this a little higher. I'm going to make this about 5 meters, and then make this one about 4 meters, like I decided to. So I say okay, so now those stories have been created, but automatically, because I had story 1 selected, I'm already on the first story. So if I double click to ground floor, I should go back to where I was. So this is the idea of what we want to create, and we should start now doing it in 3D. First things first, the radius here looks a little too much. We can't scale it down. So we can, you know, get rid of like 2 meters only on either side here, and this side also 2 meters, because I want it to be more rectangular. Yeah, I think that will work. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for joining us, Moses Chinobe from Kampala, Uganda. Yes, I'm also streaming from Kampala. I'm glad to have some people here in the country. Yes, now let's get the slab tool, and then we are going to have the slab here, which is in the toolbox, the most common thing that we use here in archicad, and we want to make that slab. Yeah, let's just click the 4 corners, or you can use any other method of construction in here. So we have the first slab, and by default, that slab, when we scroll here, we have it starting on 0, which is pretty fine. And as well, you can adjust, you know, the material that slab is made of. Maybe we can use one of these presets, like this concrete floor insulated with a tile on top. But, you know, we are going to make a conceptual model. We do not even want to see those details. But all we are concerned with is it needs to be at least thick enough to have, you know, reasonable thickness here in 3D. Okay, so now let's create a hole. How do you create a hole in the slab? It's easy. Clicking on any of the sides with that Mercedes-Benz okay, inverted Y shape, you get these pet palettes like we talked about before, and then you can be able to use the minus in order to remove any shapes which are in there. So hold down spacebar and remove that space in there. So now we have a slab like this, and in 3D we should be able to see it. So let's go there, and already we have something in 3D, but it's too much detailed. We can see some finishing, things like that. But since we are doing a conceptual model, it's important that we change our 3D to a white model. So whenever you right click in 3D and go to 3D projection settings, I believe. No, not 3D projection settings. You go to 3D styles, yes, and then you can choose a white model, because we don't want to expose so much of the material. But you create a white model. You can add some shadows in there if you so wish. I'm going to make just a white model, so now you already have this feel of conceptual. So now let's also create the same thing on the first floor, or we can just copy this and paste it on the first floor. So there are multiple ways of doing this. We can just say copy here, and then we go on the first floor and paste it in, which is the easier way. Or we can also do it in 3D. So if we go to 3D, we can make this kind of elements which are 4 meters apart by just let's get rid of this one. But with this one selected, we can make a copy, yes, and take it all the way up to that height, which is 4 meters. But I wanted to show you this because there's a problem of doing this in 3D. If you elevate something in 3D, you will have an issue that in 2D, it's not going to automatically go on the first floor. So if I go to the first floor, you can see that nothing happens. But if I go to the ground floor, I am having two slabs. If I hover over this, I have a slab here, which is 300 millimeter thick, if you can see those dimensions there, and 4 meters high. So the slabs are going to be stacked up on the ground floor. Now, this may not be a serious issue for just two slabs, but sometimes you have like 40 stories and you do it in 3D. So you have a lot of slabs on the ground floor and they are not on the respective floors. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had this problem where the slabs have been all created on the ground floor and now you're confused what to do with those slabs because you cannot affect them like the way you would want. So I want to give you a quick fix for that, such that when the next time you have slabs on the ground and you want to work in 3D, what you can do about it. So the best way is to use the multiply tool. So if you have the slab selected, if we have this slab selected, I can say Ctrl U for multiply, Ctrl U. And when I do that, I want to elevate because that's all I need. So if I elevate and make sure that I set to home story, yes, you see this button called set to home story, that is what is going to put those things in the respective stories. So now if I say okay, and then I put in the 4 meters, let's tab and say 4 meters, I should expect that slab to be on the first story like that. So you can already see that if I wanted to make multiple stories, I already have this effect. And the beautiful thing is that if I do this on the first floor, we should have a slab there. You see, unlike before, now we have a slab on the first floor and we have a slab on the second floor and then also as well on the ground floor, and we don't have that problem anymore. Well, that was a quick one that I wanted to share with you. So now we can get rid of this stuff because we do not need it. So that's the first stage. We have the slabs, which indicate those two, stories. And of course, like we said before, these two actually we deleted the ones we needed. We do not need the one which is on the ground floor, and we need those which are to delete these others, because on the ground floor, this is where our shell is going to start from and do the magic. Okay, yes, thank you so much for joining us. Let's continue now and then have that going on. Now, once we have these two slabs together, we are going to now create these elements here, which we can see here in the reference, which are these design elements. I can call them trusses, I think. And in archicad, we already have a trusses tool. So let's go ahead and just bring in an object. So if you go to objects, we have here something called truss. Yes, when you go to search, yeah, in objects, if we say truss, we already have something here which is called whole truss. And what's beautiful is that this truss is exactly what is in the reference, because you can see in here we have these trusses which move towards the right and then backward here as well. And then we have a middle one which has this vertical. So if you also go onto the reference here in flat hole truss, we have the same thing. We have these elements which go to the right and then the elements which come backward and like that. So that's the one you need. Thank you so much, Cosmos, for joining us. Now we are going to have that here in archicad. So let's just drop it in. So click to drop it in. I've dropped it in the ground floor. That's not right. We need to have it on the first floor. So let's drop it in here. Control E to rotate, of course. And let's have it like so. And you know what? Let's do this in 3D. Because I find it fun to work in 3D. So let's drop the truss here, which is, you know, like we did before, it was not on the right orientation. So Control E to rotate. And I don't know, like there's a way beginners fail to rotate, but the concept of rotation is actually simple. So I'm reminding you the shortcut because it saves you a lot of time. So Control E enables you to rotate, but then here is what you have to watch out for. You just click on one point and then click on the other point which you want to rotate, and then you specify the third click is what is actually rotating. Yeah, so the third click rotates the thing. So let me know if you got that, because it's a simple concept, I think. So clicking on any of the edges, we get this pet palette, and we can choose to, you know, expand this kind of thing. And once we have it expanded, we also need to expand it vertically or vertically, depending on how you do speak the English. Then looking at this, you can see we have a little bit more of those. So I believe in the settings, we should be able to add more trusses. Yeah. Number of divisions here are 6. Maybe we can increase them, maybe like to 8 or something. I think I'm happy with that. You can always increase them until you are happier. Maybe 10. It depends on the look you're going for and the dimensions you actually chose. So I think I'm happy with this now. So let's duplicate the same thing on either side. So here in 3D, how do we duplicate? We need to just, you know, mirror. We can mirror this, Control Shift M, in order to mirror along this axis here, 45 degrees, right? So when we mirror, you can see that now we have this here, and we can move this backward to somewhere like there. And we also mirror those two now to get the rest of the two sides. So with this selected and this one as well, which is not easy to select, you have to go on the corners. So with holding down Shift, you can go to the corners and click, and then you can be able to mirror this, because this is an object. You need to select it by the corner. So Ctrl Shift M allows you to mirror across here. So I need to make sure that I am at 45 degrees. Here I can see it's 135 degrees, but that's a multiple of 45 degrees. Yes, so once I have mirrored, we should have something going on here. But of course, we need to come in and fix this, which is on the wrong places. Yeah, so let's have this all the way up to here, and finally also have this coming all the way to here. Okay, you can type in the comments the questions that you have so far, because we are halfway through the model. Yeah, so in case you do not understand anything, I would be happy to clarify and keep the discussion going. Now we already have that. Also, we need some of those elements inside, on the inside of this thing. Yeah, so we need some of those elements in here. So you can do that in the first floor. Yeah, and that's also this other thing that we need to watch out for, because currently the elements that we have added in are on the ground floor. Now let me delete these lines, so you can mark Q and then select line. So with the line selected, you can select all those lines and delete them. Of course, it was polyline, not line. So let's select these ones and delete them. So these trusses, the objects that we added, have been put on the ground floor, and yet we know from the design these things are supposed to be on the first floor. So what's important is that now we have to move them to the first floor. Let's say Ctrl X to cut them and just put them on the first floor. And since they are objects, they will, in 3D, they will be messed up, so they would be on a different, height. So you need to make sure that now you go in either a section or elevation and bring them back to the level they are supposed to be. So now if I use this elevation, so I'm going to just move it across. So let's open this elevation and bring those elements back down by just selecting them and bringing them down. So you can already see they are off what we intended them to be, but we can always drag and bring them, down here. And of course, even here, I can realize we did not have this building at the correct height. And we can use this opportunity to take this to the 0 mark. So always come in here in sections and elevations to bring the building to the correct heights. Okay, yes, thank you so much for joining in from wherever. I can see we are already 24 live. I'm glad that all of you are here. So now we should have that thing a little bit raised, because previously it was 4 meters rather than the 5 that we intended actually for it to be. So now we want to also put the trusses inside, because if I look at this, we also have those trusses on the inside part. So you want to make sure that we come in here on the first floor and move this stuff in. This is actually annoyingly on the ground floor again. So we want to just make sure that we change this to first floor. The reference, let me do that again. If it's still on the ground floor, just change from here, home story settings, and change it to the first floor. So now it's on the first floor, but of course it will be messed up like we did see. So we want to go back to the elevation and bring it down. And hopefully this time we should have it solved when we bring it back to the respective story that we indicated that it should be. So make sure that you come in and put it at the very specific points that you intended it to be. Okay. Gasana Alilatif. You will forgive me if I pronounce that wrong. Thank you for joining. So let's have this in here. And of course, with them selected, make sure they are, oh God, it's still on the ground floor. But, you know, that's not the point. This is just a reference, they call it 3D conceptual model. We can always fix those things when we are done with this, you know, concept. So let's go in and make sure that we have some of those references inside here. So make sure that we can use the trace reference to see what's happening on the top where we have the hole, and make some changes such that we can have this coming in here. And of course, you can see this one becomes crowded. So if I go to 3D, we should have something here, and you can see it's too much. If I try to orbit to that area, if I come here, you can see that this is a little bit too crowded compared to what's happening on the outside. So you can always reduce the number of those trusses by reducing the number here in the settings. If you look at the number of divisions, we could make them just above half, maybe 6 should look respective to this. So depending on what you want, you should be able to have that fixed. Like we did before, you can always mirror at 45 degrees or the 135 degrees to have this one here. And try changing the home story of the object. Yes, we tried. Let's go and try that. Let's have this, then control mirror. Of course, this is not going to be the correct mirroring position. Yes, thank you, Arthur, for the suggestions. We try that. Let's go and have this in the right position here. And let's have this one here. So that's exactly what we actually did by changing this home story to the first floor. So maybe this time we could try having it on by selecting all objects. So this is a trick of actually selecting elements which are similar. If you wanted to select all slabs, you just click on slab and say Control A. If you say slab and say Control A, all slabs will be selected. But of course here they are not slabs. We have just objects. So with object selected, which is somewhere here, and say Control A, you can see all objects have been selected. Yes. Thank you. Using Revit and trying to learn archicad. Yes, you're welcome. Yeah, to learn archicad. So multiply, Control EE. No, multiplying is Control U. Please note that radar. It's Control U to multiply. Yeah. If I say Control U, I have all these options to either drag, rotate, or elevate. All right, so let's have, now we have this, and like I wanted to share with Arthur, if we go to the settings, we have an option to change home story to the first floor story. Yes, to the first floor story. So once we do that, of course, it's going to change the actual story, and all those elements are going to go on the story above. So let's perhaps try to say that this one should start at 0, and let's say, and see what happens. So we have them on the first floor, but instead let them start from 0. Let's say okay, and now it should shift from the ground floor but to the first floor. Yes, so now it's in the right one, but what we have to watch out is by going to the elevation here and making sure that it's not actually shifting. Yes, so now right now it's not shifting. So all we have to do is to come in and position these things, you know, slightly below. Hopefully it doesn't go back like it used to do. You see, that's the challenge we have. Whenever we put the object below the 0 mark, you can see that now we have lost the story. It has gone back to the ground floor. That's new. So I'm going to try something else and see if it works. So now let me measure by how much I'm going to reduce it. So I can see here 210. So I put in, instead of here changing, let's put in negative 110. No, 210, because that's what I saw. Negative 210. Yeah, so that we still have it on the first floor. But if you can see this dialog box here, let me try to bring things in the middle so that you can see them. So currently with it selected, it's on the first floor, and you can see I have put in a negative value such that it doesn't change the story automatically. Put here negative 210, and you can see that it has gone to the correct place. So I select these ones as well, which have not moved, and say negative 210. Yes, rather you're saying, I mean, you rotate. Oh, okay. So Control E is for rotate. Yes, it's for rotate. Yes, so now we are, of course, we have some of these here. So also select them and make sure they are still on the first floor. So I'm zooming here such that I can be able to make you see this. And alternatively, if you wanted to see these options much better, you can always shift this bar and put it on the right, yeah, somewhere like here, so you don't have to always scroll through them. So you can see that now I have something here. You still scroll, but not so much. So with this selected, you can see that it's now on 0. So put here negative 210. And for those who missed that, it's just by clicking this upper part section here that you can be able to drag. So I'll put that in, and yes, so now we have something going on here. And in 3D, I think we should be done with the first phase of this model. All right, so now we are going to do the shell part, because I believe by now we have done this modeling part. So let's do something to do with the shell, and for that we need to use the shell tool. Yeah, the shell tool. Let me remove these reference lines. So right click and remove all these guidelines in order to get rid of them. And of course the reference was on the ground floor, so we have something like this. So I'm going to move it away from the rest of the things such that we are able to see what that is. Control E to suspend group. If something is grouped and now it's not, make sure that you unsuspend group. So right now the groups are suspended and I only can select one at a time. But if I unsuspend the grouping, it should be able to automatically select grouped elements. Yeah. So let's move this, maybe a copy of it somewhere here. And we want to make a shell which looks like this. So now we use the shell tool. So let's go and pick the shell tool, which is under here, which should be able to see soon enough. Let's get shell, where are you? Somewhere here. Yes, after the roof tool, we have the shell tool, and we want to create something interesting. Let's get any of these methods which should be able to work. So in the first category, if we look at geometry method 1, we have this kind of thing, method of construction, and this one as well. And then in the second one, it's for resolution or change in revolving. And then in the final one, we have these other methods. And I believe the one we are looking for is the first kind of thing and the second method of construction. If we look at this method here. I don't know how to increase it in your screen. Maybe in the future I will figure it out, but just choose the first method of geometry, the first geometry method, and choose the second method of construction, which is construction method 2. And once you have that done, you have to also think about the shell. What material do you want it to be made of? Choose any material of your choice. I will use any of the presets, and all we have to do is to now know how thick, how deep we want that slab to be. So we want that shell to run from all the way, let's see. So this is 33 meters, but we want it to overlap by maybe another 3 meters. So let's forget about the shell for now and think about how that thing is going to actually work. So we are going to overlap it here by 3 meters. Perhaps maybe that 3 meters is small. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger, maybe by 6 meters from here, and as well overlap it on the other side by the same 6 meters. So now I'm going to measure from the beginning to the very end. So we should have a shell which is spanning 45 meters along for my case. It may be different from your case. So let's go back to the shell now. Under design, we pick the shell tool and make sure, just for recap, in the geometry construction, you are on the first option, and in the construction method, you are on the second option. And now you hold down the space bar, and click in order to enter the extrusion value. So when you click, you can see now we have the extrusion value which we put in, the 45 meters that we have just seen. 45 meters, and then we say okay. Now it should automatically create it for us. Awesome, right? Because now we have something like this, but we need to watch out because this is in the wrong plane. So let's bring it to where it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be somewhere here, and of course what we selected is starting from here. So when you drag an object, let me show you this trick. When you say Ctrl D and drag, you can hold down Shift to have it in the horizontal, move it in the horizontal, and when you click at a reference point, it should move that point, you know, up to there. Just a quick one in order to reference that. But of course, this is not how the slab should be. The slab should be. It should actually be the other way around. So Ctrl E to rotate. So let's make sure that we are getting that right. It should be actually 90 degrees like that, yeah, because this side is the one which has this, you know, mountain. The mountain is going to be seen along this plane. Okay, so we want to be sure that we actually have it in the right place. Yes, so this is what we want actually, and we can always, you know, rotate it. So we want to be able to rotate this thing because in 3D, if I just want to show you, this shell is the wrong way, so we want to be able to rotate it. So we want to use something like an elevation in order to do that. So if you look at this south elevation, we should be able to rotate it. So let's go back to that south elevation and get our vertical thing and just, you know, rotate it. So let's get this and then Ctrl E to rotate. Yes, like Reda noted. And then we can do that. So now we should have hold down the Shift in order to, you know, have it perfectly horizontal, and of course move it a little closer. And if I remember the dimension that I did use, it was around 6 meters away from this, yeah, but we can always cross-check it in the floor plan, yeah. So now we have something going on here. So on the ground floor, let's go here. We have this thing which is 6 meters away, like we did predict before. These are the 6 meters and the 6 meters this other side. Okay, so now we have this intersecting thing, and in 3D it should look more like we would want it to be. Yes, so we are already almost there, and I think this looks pretty good. Okay, let me know if you're following just fine. I'll be glad to answer any of your questions. All right, so now that we have this, we are going to create the openings, because this form interacts with this, and we need to make sure that it's interacting in the right way, I think. So we can do that either in elevation, or I don't know, can we do that in 3D? When you right click, yes, you can actually do it in 3D, but because we do not know the correct points to click in order to create the hole, it's better we do it in a section. So I'm going to use the section to actually do this. But the option that we're going to use, which is helpful for this thing, in order to create these holes, I'm talking about these ones here, if you look in the reference, because this form goes through this other form, right? So in order to create that, you have already seen how it's actually done. So select the shell, right click, and you can see this option here, which is create hole in shell. So that's the option we're going to use. But like I said, we're going to use it in this elevation thing. Yeah. So this is the view that you want. And let's kind of sketch out how it should look like. And if we use just a line, just lines, or maybe polylines, we should be able to use, you know, the usual method of construction, and you know, you can decide your thing to be like so, or something like this. Yes, just to leave some space, because if I look at the reference, yeah, you leave a little bit of space up here, but I doubt any space under here, because this form has to touch this one for stability. So what I'm saying is the hole starts just at the slab level here, but you can leave some space up here. All right, so now let's have this slab selected and create that hole. So right click and say create hole in shell. And once you have done that, you should be able to create this thing, this hole in here, which is as simple as, you know, clicking these four corners. Okay. Thank you, Robert, for appreciating. I hope Iraq is fine. Okay, let's have that in 3D, and you can see we have the form going through. It's pretty exciting, huh? And you can see when you create a hole on one side, it actually goes through the whole entire form. So if we never wanted this other side for it to go through, you can always reduce that hole, because you have control over that hole. If you click on any of the sides, you can actually move it inward. Yeah, you can reduce it. That's the point, you can reduce it. The option that we have chosen now is not the one, so we want to choose the very first option for reducing how deep that opening goes. So if we took it to the middle here, you can see that we have a hole on one side, but we do not have a hole on the other side. But that's not what we want. Okay, they're saying, can you activate shadows, please? Okay, thank you so much, Ian, for being here. I think for you to see better, he is suggesting that we have some shadows. Let's have some shadows. Yes, I think that maybe that is a little bit clearer, hopefully. Of course, the shadows are not that strong, but hopefully that's a bit clearer. So let's have this back. I can say Ctrl Z just to, you know, take it a little bit back. So we have that hole in the shell, and of course we need to do the same thing on the other side. And is it possible for us to duplicate a hole? Let's try that and see if it works. What if I selected this hole, Ctrl Shift D, and moved it across? Could that work? And made a copy. I'm holding down Shift such that I'm perfectly horizontal in the Y-axis. And oh god, it's hard to select. Yes, I've got a point. And yes, it's actually possible for you to duplicate a hole in a shell. Okay, right, so now we have those two and the conceptual model is done. Okay, and that's what you needed. So let me know in the comments whether this was useful. Have you ever tried to use this before? I'd be glad and happy to hear from you. But it's actually an easy thing, but on your own sometimes you get it gets a little bit hard to work with these kind of things, the shells. And we were actually glad to have a truss already with us, which looks like the one we had before. But let me know down in the comments if I can actually give you a trick on how to create your own truss. What if the truss which was here was a little bit different and it doesn't look like any of the presets that we have in the archicad objects? Because currently we just used archicad objects and we are limited to what archicad has to offer. So let me see. Bennett, thank you so much for joining us. So let me know if I should do that for you, and you can be able to create your own truss. Because do you mind going back to the shell tool? Okay, someone wants to understand the shell tool bit. Okay, that I wouldn't mind. Okay, thanks a lot. Awesome. All right, so now what we are going to do first is I want to show you something really interesting that archicad actually can do to create the truss. And then after that, we should recap something to do with the shell, with the shell tool. Okay, thank you so much. Now we are going to do that. If we go to the section, let's create our own truss. Okay, imagine that this is not the truss that we actually wanted to create. We had something else. Let's create something else simply here. So I'm going to use two kinds of lines and I'll show you why that's important. So let's get something here. So I'm going to create a truss in this region. So I've just created a box of sorts. So I'm going to pick this, put it up here, and let's create a different truss. I don't know which other method of truss is available to us. So I'm going to pick a line and perhaps make it a polyline. Yeah. So let's create you know what? Let's just create a unique pattern, just a simple unique pattern. Yeah. I'm going to go around and create something that's weird. And you know what? I'm going to make half of it and mirror it. So probably this is a bad idea, but hopefully it shall be useful to someone who wanted to create a unique thing to their own particular design. So I'm going to make it a different color pen because that's important for the Trustmaker tool. So with it selected, let's choose another color. We're going to use blue this time. And we can't move this stuff around because whereas we want to create something unique, we also need I'm going to also move this stuff because we also need it to be stable and functional. So let's make sure that at certain points it touches. Thank you, Sadiq Abrams, for joining us. Need more tutorials on the shell. Okay, we are going to go back to the shell in a bit. So right now, I want us to create something and hopefully it should be a useful tip. So let's create something weird. So go ahead and create your own unique weirdness and we make it into, using the Trustmaker tool we created. So I'm going to make the ugliest of all, just for example. So let me mirror this. I have stopped it in the middle so that I'm able to mirror it. So perhaps this is what we wanted to see. I'm sure it's the ugliest of what you will make. Now with this, we can select it and we go, I believe it's design, and we can say design extras, and then we have something here called Trustmaker. Let me know if you have ever used this feature. I find it very useful. If you go to design extras, and make sure that you are on Trustmaker, and you can see the option which is called create truss. So now you can create this truss that we actually have made. So let's say create truss, and now we get this dialog box. So with this dialog box, we can change parameters depending on what we have selected. So you can already see under attributes, of course, here you can change the floor plan representation. But like I said, this is a conceptual thing. We are not worried so much about the 2D. We want to look at the 3D, which is here in the truss profile. So truss profile, you can see it captured the two pens, the red pen, which was the boundary, and the blue pen. So you can make as many pens as possible if you want to have control on how thick your trusses are going to look like. So right now I have two, one as the boundary and the blue one as the inward thing. So with this, now we can make thickness. Let's say the boundary is going to be a little bit thicker. So we're going to make it, I don't know, maybe 150 by 80. No, we need it to be higher. So the 150 will be the height, and then we can reduce how wide it is. So you can look at the cross-sectional representation in order to see this. So now we want to this in the one in the middle should be a little smaller. I'm going to make it like perhaps, I don't know, 75 by, I don't know, 50. But of course we want it the other way around. Yeah, you look at this cross-section in order to change to the shape that you want. I think I'm going to have the 50 as the width. Yeah. All right, so now with that, let's just create this. Yeah, say okay, and you can already see that now it has been created and it's named as truss 1. I'm going to say here truss example, and say save, so that we will get this warning which says that this truss object is going to be created on the floor plan. Yeah, and that's fine. So once we have that done, you can already see that we have something already created for us. And also in the ground floor, it should show up somewhere, whether in the ground floor, first floor, or whatever. But with the elevation which we did have, we can move it to the exact same place that we actually wanted it to be. So I'm going to copy this and bring it down here. So let's grab this and perhaps by the edges and place it in here. And perhaps we should have something really interesting going on. So let's temporarily delete what is here. I'm going to delete this, the existing truss, and we look at it in 3D, and we should have something interesting. Of course, it's not in the exact place, but you can already see that it's easy for you to make your custom truss in case we do not have you do not have the truss already in the objects, which is pretty easy. So let me know down in the comments whether that was useful. Thank you so much, Peter Wambu, for joining us, and Moses. Okay, thank you so much. Well delivered. Okay, I'm glad that I am clear and audible and you can follow along just fine. So now let's get this. You can get that thing into place, of course, by moving it backward, either in 2D. I can't seem to find it in 2D, so I'll just go to 3D and move it backward and place it to where it's supposed to be, because it was created along the elevation. So now it's in space, so we can move it back to this other area. And now we have our own unique, weird thing going on. Now, let's go back to the shell tool, as many have requested. Yes, following live, Paul from Kenya, Kisumu. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, shell tool. There are different ways to actually use the shell tool. I'm going to delete this because we're going to create it again. I don't know. I'm just giving you a quick overview of how actually the shell tool works. It's actually easy. It's about understanding the methods that have been presented to you here and how to use them in archicad. So for example, if I have this second method, which is the second geometry of the shell tool, we can go ahead and use the methods which have been given to us here. So for example, if I use this usual one, this easy one, we click on the center and we are able to create this, dome shell. But we can also create the dome shell in a more complex method of construction. If you look at this, we already have something here which is telling us that we can create a shape, yes, and then revolve around a center to make this shape. I'm going to use that as an example of like, what if we wanted to create like a huge pot, because that's the easiest example that I can remember of how I can use this. If I said, you know what, let's get some lines, yeah, maybe a spline, and we do half of the pot, because you need to understand how this works. So perhaps this is the flower pot, perhaps, and then maybe it flattens out here because it wouldn't be physically possible to have something like that. Now I'm going to draw a line here which is about the axis. So what I'm trying to achieve, in a minute, let me show you, is I have a shape here that I want to revolve around that axis, which is exactly, if you look at the design and shell tool, what this method of construction is telling us. It's like, draw a shape and revolve around an axis in order to create this second method of construction. So if I have this shape, we can revolve it around this axis. So let me make this such that it doesn't touch, because that's important. I don't want this shape to be interpreted as part of this axis. This is just for reference. So with the shell tool selected, now we can space click to pick these parameters here. You can see that it's already recognizing them. And we use this axis, sorry, didn't pick that up. So let's do that again. So with the shell tool selected, we do this. Just make sure that we do not have any space between this and that. Yes, I believe there isn't. And we have the shell tool selected, and then we choose that method and say space click once we have that captured, and then revolve around the middle here. This is the axis, yeah, and here it's asking you by what angle we are revolving. So I'm going to say maybe 360 because it's a pot. What do you expect? 360. And there we have ourselves a flower pot or something like that, which is how that method of construction of the shell works. But of course, for some reason, it has not captured this base here, and that means that I will have to revise it. But of course, remember, you can also change the material with which it is made. If you wanted it to be a little bit thinner, you can choose a thinner material. Perhaps that should be thinner. And of course, you can also, use a custom single material if that's what you want. Okay. Let me see. Is it making your computer crash or something? Valid. Sorry about that. Greetings from Ecuador. Thank you, William, for joining us. Also, let me know if you're following right, especially if you are interested in the shell tool. Let me know if you are following all right. Now we are going to have also here I was trying to show you, if you go to the settings, you can actually create a thickness that you actually want. I'm going to make this like, I don't know, like 300, 100, whichever you so wish. And already this shape should be appearing in 3D. Of course, is it appearing? Yes, it is. Of course, now it's hard to see because now we are in the famous mode, which is the mode with shadows. If we went back to the basic vectorial or the simple shading with shadow, you should already see that weird pot thing that I was trying to make. Okay, so that's the second method of construction. This other thing is showing us that we can create forms and then create also another kind of thing. So what they are trying to say, if I just draw it in here in 3D, is we can create a shape. Let's try here in unfortunately it's not going to work well in 3D. You need a little bit of control. So what's the quickest example I can remember about this shell? Sometimes you have like a boundary wall which is in a weird shape. So let's do something. Let's make a polyline. Let's make something here. Let's have a weird shape here and then create another shape which is under here, which is exactly what this method is trying to tell us. It's like, what if you had the first shape? If you look at this method, which is in design, shell, and we have this method of construction, which is geometry 3, and then we have this other thing going on here. So you can create the first shape here and then the other shape will be different. So what I'm saying is that just space click to pick this shape and specify the distance and space click to capture the other shape. Yeah, this other shape or this other shape you actually have to draw it manually. So space click and then say okay, and then you can be able to draw this other shape. So you can already see that in 3D should look something like that. So if you had a kind of thing where you have to specify areas which are which are being joined and are two different shapes apart, so you can see that you already have something like this. I think I have seen a boundary wall which was weird with something like that. Maybe it's not so far apart, but I have seen something like this in real life. Yeah, maybe something like that. So if that's what you're interested in and you can actually do that, you can already see the potential of the shell tool in doing that. Well, those are the two different, methods of creating, the shell tool, which are outside of the example that we have, because I wanted to do the one that we have last. So let's do that. If we go to the ground floor, first of all, the thing that we did was to first sketch out what our shell looks like. So if I go back here, you can see that this is the shape you actually want, or the shape that we actually needed, and we have it here. So what we wanted was a shell which enables us to do this shell and then we extrude it. Okay, like we have here, we have a shape here, a unique shape, and then it's extruded along the whole thing. So that's all we needed. And that method is what we have here under shell, the very first one, because the very first one allows us to specify two kinds of things: the shape and the extrusion length. Okay, so with that shape drawn out, and I think by now you should be able to draw that shape by yourself, because all we did was to use lines and then we chamfered them. Yeah, if I made these two lines meet, if I said, or for example, this line and this line, and I made them meet here by hitting intersect, you can click on the node and be able to fillet with this pet palette here. You can choose fillet, and then you can be able to put in the radius of the filleting. And once you do that, you should be able to get that and I have intentionally made it not the same as this one, such that you can see what I'm talking about. So once you have your preferred shape down, you pick the shell tool and you pick that method of construction, which is the very first one and the second, method of construction, and space click in order to capture that space, that shape, and then put in the extrusion length. So let me know if that was clear, because it's as simple as that. Pick the shell tool, space click on your shape, and then add the extrusion length. So the extrusion length for my case is 45 meters, which I already did enter before because it's remembering it. So I'm glad that Tamim, engineer, you are following fine. And then I say, okay, and now that has been created. But the challenge that we have is that this stuff, we are doing it in 2D. So it's actually being done upside down in 3D. So if we go to 3D, of course, we should have some weird shapes which are on the wrong axis. So we want to be able to rotate that. You can already see that this wants to go like this, 90 degrees to the ground. So one thing that we have to do is to just rotate that in 3D. So first of all, this arc is supposed to be along this length, which is here. So that's why we have to rotate this and make sure that it's going to face the correct way. So with the elevation or section, we should be able to create this thing in the correct axis, so to say. And let's say we want to rotate it to be the way we want it. So we cannot choose. The mistake that I have seen people make is trying to rotate it using the wrong elevation. For example, if we opened this elevation, we would be looking at it the wrong way. If I open this and we try to look at this thing, you can see that now if we try to rotate it, it's going to be in the wrong axis. So we want to use the axis which is actually going to do the right rotation, which is in this case the south elevation. So you want to be able to open the south elevation and be able to open it such that it's being rotated in the right plane. So Ctrl E to rotate and then do the 90, and you can see that now we have something interesting going on. Of course, like we said before, you can just go in here and reorganize to have it start in the correct place. We already made some reference lines here, like this line. So if I move this shell, I should be able to align it to the correct, space. And we are able to see that in 3D, which is right here. And I have removed the white model such that you can be able to see clearly. Let me know if this is useful, whether you're seeing this much more clearer than the white model, or if I should change back to the white model. So now, once you have this done, we want to be able to create this hole through. And like I said, it's easy to create a hole through this shape. And all you have to do is to have this shape selected, this shell selected, right click on it and say create a hole in shell. It's as easy as that. And if you knew the shape that you want to create in 3D, you could go ahead and actually draw, that shape in here. But you can already see that the plane on which we are working is at an angle, and that would not be good for us. So it's important that we actually work this out in the section, because then we'll be working with a much more familiar orthographic view, if so to say. So let's have that in the elevation, like the south elevation, and create that hole. So we already have the reference of the hole, which I did make before. So with the shell selected, just right click and say create hole in shell, and then you go ahead and do the shape, which is as easy as clicking the corners one by one in order to create it. So you can create your custom shape. So, and like I did mention before, you see it has been formed on this other side because that's where the elevation pointed us to. So we have it here, and like I mentioned before, automatically all elements that are in that elevations have been affected by this hole. But if we did not want to see that hole go through this other part of the shell, we could, reduce that opening, yes, by clicking here and using the very first option, which is edit the extrusion length. We could edit the extrusion length of this actual thing, yeah, and have it go down. So in this case, it's only extruding one side. It extrudes just this other side. So we can remove this other side and take it down. Let's take this to this other side, and you can see that it no longer exists here, but it exists on this other side. So we can, number one, create a hole in shell, and two, adjust whether or not we want that hole to affect either sides of the same shell, if you know what I mean. So now I will undo that because we actually want it to go through those two. And like I said before, I tried out something which is pretty interesting. Being able to duplicate that hole, actually, it can work. So Ctrl+Shift+D, you can duplicate the hole within the shell and it will work perfectly fine. So Ctrl+Shift+D to drag that in 3D, and with holding down Shift, you should be able to move it in the X-axis. Yes, X-axis, and then you click the final point and you should have the two holes. So we have something here which is very interesting. Okay, I hope that was a quick overview. It's actually very easy to understand. Thank you so much, ED from, is that the name? Sorry if I didn't get that right, from Thailand. Thank you so much, and I hope that introduction to the shell tool was helpful. There are so many examples that we could pick from, perhaps for another time, but I am so glad that you stuck with me to the very end. So let me know below if you followed just fine and you got something from in here, and we can discuss and see this thing that we did create. If we go back to the 3D styles and say white model with shadow, you can see you cannot see the mess that you were seeing before, which was the blue lines. But if we go back to the model, the actual model, how it's going to look like, you can actually control how this thing is going to look like by going to the settings of that thing that we did create custom, by adjusting them in the settings. So you can see that now the control pane is blue, so you can adjust that depending on the look that you want. And also the surface material, you can change that. Perhaps you want it to actually look like wood, not like some blue alien thing, and that should be able to reflect. So you can already see that I can affect that material independently. All right, that's been it for today. Hope you got a thing or two, and it's been a simple concept, but I hoped to put across some very crucial things that help in practice. Thank you so much for joining in, and I'm glad that you were here with me, and hopefully next Sunday we'll see you there. Okay, thank you so much.